Continue on with part 9. This will be subpart C of the FDA final rule. So I'll just continue. 29040. Some ENDS or electronic nicotine delivery systems might heat their product to a level high enough to cause combustion. FDA believes that ENDS could serve as alternatives to combusted tobacco products. So that's like a contradiction on the same exact page, 29040. So what they're saying is if it's heated high enough, like if you're vaping at maybe 200-300 watts on a 0.06 sub-ohm, super sub-ohm build, it may create actual combustion. It says might is the key word in that. The operative word in that sentence is might. They don't have any substantial scientific data that it does, but it might. I mean, I could say tomorrow the sky might fall. I could say tomorrow the sun will explode. Tomorrow the sun might explode. Anyone can say might. It's ridiculous what the FDA final rule is all about. But and then on the same page it says FDA believes the ENDS could serve as alternatives to combusted tobacco products. Because there is scientific substantial data that states that combusted cigarettes or combusted tobacco products / analog cigarettes are unhealthy. They create many risks to your health. It's extremely unhealthy for you. But as far as the e-cigarette is concerned, they have no substantial scientific data. 29040 states significant reductions in exposure to carbon monoxide and the toxicant acrolein, that's ACROLEIN, in electronic nicotine delivery system. So they're saying that there are significant reductions in exposure to carbon monoxide and the toxicant acrolein. So once again, it shows that on 29040 that the electronic nicotine delivery systems, like something like this, or something like this, or something like this, or something like this, as well as something like this, it states significant reductions in exposure to carbon monoxide. Now, on analog cigarettes, combusted cigarettes does create carbon monoxide. But in e-cigarette products, it does not, it says significant reductions in exposure to carbon monoxide. So e-cigarettes does not create carbon monoxide like combusted cigarettes. 29041. FDA is not banning any category of tobacco products by issuing this final deeming rule. Well, they might not be banning it, which they cannot do under the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, but what they can do is limit that marketplace by having people going through the PMTA process, substantial equivalence process, without the Cole-Bishop Amendment in place, enacted into law, through the substantial substantial equivalence reports process, pre-market substantial equivalence process, registration process, as well as a certification process for 0 mg nicotine. They're not banning it. No, they can't do that under the law, under the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, but they can limit that marketplace, because not many people will be able to go through those, especially the PMTA process, the pre-market tobacco application process. Not only will most, if not only, let's say like 75% is a good sure bet. So 75% of the vaping industry, those products won't go into the PMTA process because it's not worth it to them to spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars only to be denied, only to have your application denied by the FDA. So, and that way it restricts or constricts the vaping marketplace. So in a sense, in a very implied way, they're actually banning products through that very tedious, complex process of the PMTA. 29042 states, FDA interprets components and parts of a tobacco product to include any assembly of materials intended or reasonably expected. Now, I spoke about this. I'll take off my glasses here, a little dirty here for a second. I spoke about this in the teaser video to this FDA final rule. And I don't want to speak about this, but in the Part 5 FDA executive orders, it states very clearly in those 3 executive orders, which are part of the FDA final rule. It just referred me to those 3 executive orders signed into law by, not into law, but executed by William Jefferson Clinton. 2 of the executive orders were, and one of them was signed into or executed by Barack Hussein Obama in 2011. And those executive orders direct the federal agencies, including the FDA, of course, to streamline their framework of certain products that are on the market, including like e-cigarettes. And yet what it does, it interprets, the FDA, it says here in 29042, FDA interprets components and parts of a tobacco product to include any assembly of materials intended or reasonably expected. So you'll say to yourself, well, what's this has to do with nicotine? What's this have to do with nicotine? Well, according to the FDA, how they interpret the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, they're saying that this box mod is attached to the RDA deck is attached to the wire is attached to the cotton vaporizes the e-liquid, and there is nicotine within the e-liquid that is derived or made from tobacco plants, and therefore they're able to regulate it. That's how they interpreted the Tobacco Control Act of 2009. That's not what the Tobacco Control Act of 2009 says at all. It doesn't say that at all. In fact, there's nothing in the Tobacco Control Act of 2009 that it says one iota, not one word, about e-cigarettes or ENDS or electronic nicotine delivery systems. But the FDA interpreted that Tobacco Control Act of 2009 to come up with this concept of co-packaged, and that is everything is relative to everything else. In order to vape that e-liquid, which has nicotine in it, they can regulate everything else. But that is an FDA interpretation, which definitely can go right to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that definitely will be challenged in a court of law, because the FDA really doesn't have that power to interpret the Tobacco Control Act, because the FDA executive orders, or these executive orders, state very clearly that it must be efficient. They must follow all the acts of Congress, all the statutes, all the laws on the book. They can't interpret however they like. You understand? And only a court can really interpret the FDA final rule, let alone the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, or any statute or act of Congress that's on the books. Only a court can do that. They were really, especially when it gets to the appellate courts, especially into the U.S. Supreme Court, it will all be based on constitutionality of whatever rule it may be, regulation, statute, whatever have you, code, whatever. So this whole thing here is very important because that will be challenged in a court of law. And I'm sure these lawsuits will speak to this eventually. Actually, the essence of any lawsuit is that the FDA interpreted the Tobacco Control Act of 2009 unreasonably, or essentially they interpreted it wrong is what they did, and therefore it needs to be adjudicated in a court of law, and let the judges interpret what that Tobacco Control Act of 2009 truly says, which trumps anything the FDA final rule is all about. So that's very important, but that goes to courts. That goes to judges interpreting what the FDA final rule says, as well as especially the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, let alone the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act as well, which was, I believe, created, don't hold me to this, I think it was created in 1930. I just want to get the date right. I hate to tell you anything that is wrong. I think it's 1930, but I might be wrong. Yeah, okay, so it's it was first called Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, and then in 1938, June 25th, 1938, was signed into law by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in regards to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So it was 1938, but it originated from Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. So I just want to give you a little history to that. Anyway, on to the next one. And I just want to say this as a side note. Tobacco Control Act of 2009, Tobacco Control Act of 2009 spoke to combusted cigarettes rather than ends. Yet 99% of the FDA final rule treats ends as if they were combusted cigarettes. And this is the reason FDA final rule is misleading, which is very true. I don't know if it's essentially 99%, but probably it's probably a good 90% or maybe a little bit more of that. They're treating ends, that is, electronic nicotine delivery systems, as if they were actual combusted cigarettes. That's why like combusted cigarettes like R.J. Reynolds, Philip Morris, those companies actually go through the PMTA process. Though these days I'm sure they go through the substantial equivalence process because most cigarettes look like cigarettes that were on the market well before February 15, 2007. But they're treating e-cigarettes as if they're combusted cigarettes. And that's the reason why in the very long run, first we have to get the Cole-Bishop Amendment in place, and then legislation will grow out of that. Hopefully, it'll probably take a year or two, maybe even 3 or 4 or 5 years. But eventually, they'll have, hopefully, the very extreme long-term goal is to have vapor products in its own separate category outside of combusted cigarettes. Because even I read lines to you from certain sections in the FDA final rule that says that combusted cigarettes are much different than vaping products. So that's why vaping products need to have their own category. In fact, they need to have their own act of Congress if they can get it through without it being vetoed by the president. Now, I just want to say, as another side note, the H.R. 2058 does not do that. That's just a predicate date. So I don't want to get into all that, of course, but that's just a predicate date, and you have to see the video I just put up called H.R. 2058, which speaks to that as just the predicate date. It has nothing about having its own vapor category. That will be an entirely separate legislation someday in the future, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. But first, of course, the Cole-Bishop Amendment must be in place so you can keep those products on the market before August 8th, 2016. Anyway, on with the FDA final rule. 29042 states FDA is not imposing the same level of regulation as is currently imposed on cigarettes at this time. Well, for one thing, that's a bunch of crap, okay, to be quite honest, because the PMTA process is so tedious and complex that most, if not, I would say at least a good 75% of the vaping industry will literally be wiped out because they can't afford that complex paperwork that I speak about in the Part 6 FDA electronic submissions. That's a very long and tedious video that I'll be uploading that you could watch, which goes to the fact of that it's it's just so unreasonable. It's incredible. And therefore, the vaping industry won't be able to go through that PMTA process. And therefore, in that way, they are treating e-cigarettes just like they're treating tobacco combusted products. I'll go you one better even. Actually, in fact, this FDA final rule grew out of the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, and the Tobacco Control Act of 2009 says absolutely nothing at all, zero, zilch, nada, nothing at all about e-cigarettes. But that was the interpretation that the Secretary deemed from the Tobacco Control Act 2009. She deemed that e-cigarettes belong in that same category as tobacco control or tobacco-related products, when it really needs to be in its own separate category. And then she says, Secretary is a she, of course, Ms. Matthews, but what it says is, then it says at the end of 29042, at this time. So that means it's even going to be even worse than the PMTA process that we have right now. It's going to be even worse than the FDA final rule as it reads now. So it's going to get even more complex and much more strict in its tone and its framework in the future. 29044. FDA expects that most vape shops will stop mixing e-liquids to avoid being manufacturers. So the FDA knows very much that they're going to put vape shop owners who mix their own e-liquids, they will not be able to do that. And so that part of the business of the vape shop will be completely ousted. It will be completely eliminated. And or those profits that a vape shop owner would obtain from selling his or her own e-liquids, if they manufactured it in the vape shop, they will lose out on those profits. And the FDA actually expects that. They actually anticipate that. They don't mind putting these vape shop owners in that particular area of mixing their own e-liquids out of business. Now they can, sell other things, other products that were manufactured outside of the vape shop, like the box mods and the RDAs or whatever have you. But he can't mix his own e-liquid, or else he automatically becomes a manufacturer, and therefore he can be regulated, and therefore he has to submit all his e-liquids to the FDA through the PMTA process. 29044 states, tobacco product manufacturer includes any person, including any repacker or relabeler, who manufactures, fabricates, assembles, processes, or labels a tobacco product. So a person, let's say the person that made this e-liquid, the company that made, let's say the the guy that came up with the idea of this particular e-liquid, okay? And then let's say this company, Cosmic Charlie's Chalk Dust, contracted with another company to make the labels, to make these labels for Cosmic Charlie Chalk Dust. That company that makes the labels is considered a manufacturer. So they also have to submit application to the FDA through the PMTA process. Same with those that, what else? So it's a repacker or relabeler. So a repacker would be, pretty much the same thing. It's pretty much repacking it. So like putting, like this, some e-liquids actually come inside of a box. So a repacker is someone that creates that box or manufactures that box, can actually have to go through the PMTA process. So it's, like it says, tobacco product manufacturer includes any person, any, keyword is any, operative word in there is any person, including any repacker or relabeler who manufactures, fabricates, assembles, processes, or labels a tobacco product. Now, if Cosmic Charlie Chalk Dust does its own labels, then only he or she alone will be responsible for submitting that PMTA process application. But if these labels are made by somebody else, they're going to have to also submit a application to the FDA. But normally, where it really comes down to, which is this passage here on 29044, is actually somewhat of a contradiction to the other parts of the FDA final rule, because they, and I'll speak to it in a moment, that it's the finished product, and the person is obligated, the person that actually finishes the product is actually, has to go through the PMTA process, application process. So let's say Cosmic Charlie, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl who owns the company, okay? The brand name. And they go to what is that called? iOS or ISO? This is some kind of lab. Let me see if I can get that right. Like I said, I don't want to mislead you in anything. See if I get that right. Okay. So, so it's an ISO, which is, let's see what this means. It's a certain standard that they have to go by. These certain labs that make these e-liquids. See what that means. Okay, so it's the International Organization for Standardization, and it came down in 1999. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And founded on February 23rd, 1947, the organization promotes worldwide proprietary industrial and commercial standards. Okay, so there's certain standards that labs have to go by in these ISO labs. And I don't want to get into too much of this here. But anyway, it's about quality management systems and stuff like that. So, for instance, let's say the guy who owns the Cosmic Charlie's Chalk Dust, the brand itself, okay, they go to a ISO lab, and the ISO lab is, of course, sanitized. It's a clean lab and all that other stuff. And he makes his product there, and they manufacture the product. That lab that actually makes the finished product has to go through the PMTA process. Whoever manufactures the finished product. Or let's say one lab only does the e-liquid, and then someone else, could be the person that owns Cosmic Charlie's Chalk Dust company, it could be he or she, I don't know which one. But anyway, let's say they take the e-liquid in batches, in big drums. Let's say it comes from the labs in big drums. And then let's say the person who owns the brand name of this particular e-liquid puts it together in his vape shop. So he takes the 30 mil bottle, 30 mil e-liquid from those drums puts it in a bottle, puts an eyedropper on it, and put the label on it. Then that vape shop owner is actually responsible. He's liable, but he's also responsible to put a application through the PMTA process. It's the finished product in itself. Now, if the lab itself finishes the entire process or the product, then the lab has to submit the application. And same thing goes for hardware manufacturers. Someone that, like for this thing here, right, this battery, I don't know what you call that thing at all, but anyway, the thing for the battery so you can get the battery out easier, right? The person that manufactures this piece, just this piece, does not have to go through the PMTA process. Same with the battery sled. The person that creates this, it's either Delrin or plastic, hard plastic, doesn't have to go through the PMTA process. A person that creates these buttons don't have to go through the PMTA process. Now, the person or company that takes all those parts, puts all the parts together to make this variable voltage device, and it's a finished product, that company or persons will have to go through the PMTA process. So therefore, Tesla, if they're putting their products together as a finished product, they have to submit a PMTA application to the FDA. So that's what that's all about. And then, so like it says, assembles, people that assemble the thing as a finished product, or processes, people that process the whole thing. If they're processing it to the point that it's a finished product, they have to submit a PMTA application to the FDA. And then I'm going to read this one section here. So I didn't write it down, I just want to read it. It's a little long, so I want to read it. And it comes out of 29044. And this is how it reads. The statute authorizes FDA to regulate the manufacture of all new products, including those manufactured at the retail level. This is important to FDA's ability to protect the public health, since products manufactured at the retail level pose many of the same public health risks as those manufactured upstream, and possibly additional risks related to the lack of standard manufacturing practices and controls. The introduction of statutory controls and oversight into a historically unregulated market inevitably will lead to some market change and consolidation. FDA recognizes that with the implementation of this final rule, vape shops that meet the definition of tobacco product manufacturer may cease engaging in manufacturing activities rather than comply with requirements for manufacturers under this final rule. However, FDA notes that such entities will have the option to continue operating solely as retailers, as some vape shops currently do. In addition, as noted earlier, FDA believes that this policy and the deeming rule as a whole will not stifle innovation, but could instead encourage it. Over time, FDA expects that its pre-market review authorities will spur creative evolution and help to create a market where available products present a lower risk of user and population harm, provide a more consistent delivery under varying conditions of use, are less likely to lead to initiation of tobacco use, and are easier to quit. In recent years, ENDS products have proliferated in the absence of regulation, in some cases resulting in a lack of quality control and consistency, consumer confusion, and even availability of acutely toxic products. In this context, we expect that changes in the market in response to regulation will have significant benefits for public health and will be a net benefit overall. Just a little bit more. As the ENDS market continues to evolve, it is important that FDA exercises authority to oversee all establishments engaged in manufacturing activities and their products in order to protect consumers and to carry out the public health objectives of the Tobacco Control Act. So what they're saying is they're going to try to eliminate the health risks or possible problems associated with manufacturing. So maybe someone that manufactures a bad box mod or a tube mech mod or a variable voltage or a variable wattage device, they're going to eliminate that. Well, you know, and I did a few videos on this, especially in regards to explosions, vapors and explosions. And I would read a news article and then I'd comment on it. They had one thing with the RIG version 2 hybrid tube mech mod. There's nothing wrong with that tube mech mod itself. It's the user that uses that, or the vapor that uses that, does not have the knowledge of how to operate a hybrid tube mech mod. They don't even have any understanding of battery safety. This battery here, people don't realize a little tear. People, when they look at this battery, a newbie or even an intermediate vapor looks at this battery, they think this is the negative and this is the positive, but it's not. In fact, if you tear this wrapper just a little bit, and the metal, the external or the exterior part of that metal is showing, you will blow yourself up instantly, because outside of this positive end of it, the entire battery, including the bottom, is the negative. So when you put this inside of a, one second. So when you put that battery, it doesn't matter if it's copper, stainless steel, or whatever, brass, it doesn't matter. When that negative, let's say there's a tear in this battery, and you put this inside of the mech mod, the tube mech mod, and then you fire it. Now, I don't have a build in here, so I'm not going to fire it, but you fire it, and that side of the battery hits that metal, automatic. Doesn't even think twice. It'll just blow up. You won't have a chance. You'll lose your hand, and if you've got it to your face in time, it'll blow your face right off. Do some serious damage. In fact, the atomizer can go right down your throat into your lungs. And that is user or vapor mishandling of a product. There's nothing wrong with this. This is built perfectly. This is a very, only for advanced vapors. Every website you go to, I don't care what, every single website I've gone to, and I've gone to over 100 of them over the years since April 2011, and they all say, every single website I've come across, even websites that I didn't even buy from, say, if you're purchasing something like this, it's for advanced vapors. There's a reason they do that. Not only as a disclaimer, so they're not liable, the website or the vape shop or whoever company that's selling these products online, but that it's telling you that you need to know what you're doing or you're going to blow yourself up. So a little tear in a battery can really create a lot of problems, okay? Now, a person that had, here, now that's not a hybrid, wait a second. Now this Apollo tube mech mod, this is a hybrid. There is no positive pin. It is directly contacts, you have the battery inside of it, which directly contacts this Doge X positive pin. If any part of this piece here outside of the positive pin touches the top portion of this battery, blows up. Extremely hard short you're going to get, and that is going to blow up seriously. And that's what happened with that rig version 2. He didn't know what he was doing. It was a guy who blew himself up there. He wound up in the hospital with serious burns and all kinds of scarring in his lungs and his throat because of misuse of the rig version 2 hybrid tube mechanical mod. No, excuse me, the tube mechanical mod. Yeah. So he didn't know what he was doing. Understand? You have to, especially hybrids. Hybrids are, as far as I'm concerned, for the very advanced vapors. Not just advanced, but very advanced. And I don't know what the kind of low build he had on there. Maybe he's doing a hybrid tube mech mod, and maybe he had a ohm reading of like 0.05. It's going to explode on you. No one in their right mind would do that. Even very experienced, very advanced vapors wouldn't build a 0.05 on a hybrid mech mod with an RDA. And then who knows what kind of battery you used. Maybe you used the EFES battery. I mean, I only use, in any kind of fully mechanical box mods or tube mech mods, I only use Samsung 18650 25 hours. But maybe he was using the EFES battery or an MXJO battery. These are inferior batteries. And maybe it couldn't handle the pressure that was building up inside of the battery, because this battery is all chemicals, it's all liquids in there. Maybe he kept on vaping, and he's thinking to himself, well, that's funny, that firing button's getting a little hot, but man, I sure do enjoy this pastry vape. I'm going to keep on vaping. And before you know it, so there could be many reasons as to why they have explosions. It's not because of the product itself. Now, these fully mechanical tube mech mods, and 1 second. And these fully mechanical box mods, I mean, some of them can be faulty, like in the switch or something, might be loose, maybe the spring is not as good, or maybe the magnetics are not as good, or maybe you just need to clean your mod, by the way. You know, cleaning your mods really can help a real lot, believe it or not. People don't even realize that because of the contacts. They oxidize over a period of time. So yeah, that's the reason why you have to clean your mods. You take them apart, and that, of course, that's part of the journey of being a vapor. You like to tinker with things, but you take things apart. But these products themselves, in and of themselves, are not dangerous products unless you misuse them. Now, on the other hand, let's say you have this Cuboid 200 watt. Now, this thing could actually be, if it's faulty, normally it's built so it has a lot of safety features on there that will catch it before it actually explodes. Especially like overheating and things like that. It will literally shut it down and won't let you vape. It has short circuit protections and everything like that. Right? But let's say, for instance, something was wrong with the safety features on there and this thing blows up in your hand. Then yes, absolutely. Then the manufacturer or Joytech would be responsible in a court of law. They would be liable to the plaintiff, absolutely. But in fully mechanical box mods and tube mech mods, no. These things, and these are where the explosions are coming from. I've yet to read anything that a Cuboid blew up, or that a Kapor Mini 60 watt blew up, or even an E-Leaf 50 watt blew up. I've yet to hear any of that stuff blow up. The device itself, the electronic device itself. What I've heard is mainly tube mech mods. And that's because what they're probably doing is building extremely low, and the amps that are in the battery cannot handle that very low build. and they continuously vape on it, and before you know it, it literally vents. Because there are actually, as this battery heats up, there's chemicals in here that are actually liquid. And when it heats up, it starts to expand to the point of venting. Now, there are, on top of the positive area, some of them have two, well, most of them have two, but some even have three. There's little tiny holes in there that help with the venting in case it does vent. Okay, but normally when your build is very, very low, let's say 0.05, and you put an EFEST or an MXJO or another inferior battery inside of here with a 0.05 build, and maybe it's a dual cathode quad build or whatever it may be. Could be even single, if you could bring a single down to a 0.05, I'm sure you can. And you build it that low, and then you continuously vape on this, especially if it's a hybrid, and this battery starts to expand, the fluids that are in this battery starts to expand to the point that those vent holes on the top of the positive area cannot handle that pressure. It just blows. And the entire thing explodes, and the RDA that is attached to this will literally come out of its threads. It literally will come apart. That's how much pressure that comes off that battery. It will literally strip the threads off of these threads and literally can go right down your throat. Yeah, it can happen that way. That's how much pressure is inside of this one battery. And it's not because of the battery, and it's not because of the RDA, and it's not because of the 2-mech mod. It's because the person that is using the product as a whole unit misuses it or does not know what they're doing. It's mainly has to do with knowledge. That's what really it comes down to. You have newbies and intermediate vapors out there that don't know what they're doing, and they wind up on the front page news. Fortunately, there's only a few cases out there that have anything to do with explosions over the years. Unfortunately, the FDA exploits those very few incidences of explosions, and they use it for things like this passage that I just read to you. So no, and as you know, once again, the FDA has absolutely no idea what they're talking about. They have no idea. And you know, they listen to all the comments, all the public workshops, all the public meetings, and do they listen and apply any of that, not only knowledge, but that wisdom from the vaping industry and vaping community? Absolutely not. Completely ignored that, and only took whatever they wanted to serve their own agenda. So anyway, that's that particular area there that I wanted to speak to. And on to the next one. I'm gonna do one more paragraph, and then I'm gonna stop, and then I'll do this page, and then see if I could do a little bit more as well. Anyway, 29045. Beyond 36 months after the rule goes into effect, the compliance period no longer applies, even if the final mixture has a pending marketing submission application. All products for which a marketing submission application is pending are subject to enforcement action. So, let's say in the year of 2017, you submit an application for the pre-market tobacco application process. Okay, you submit all your papers, cost you $600,000 or probably more. In the year 2017, I think it goes up a bit. So it goes from like $599,000 to, I don't know, $600 and something $100,000. So you submit all your paperwork to the FDA, and then the FDA, well, of course they have 180 days, like I just spoke about, that they have to comply within that 180 days. But let's say, you know, they're overloaded with applications or whatever reason it may be. Okay? And let's say it finally elapses. Okay? Now, if it's in the application process, then you will not undergo any enforcement from the FDA as long as your application has been received by the FDA itself. Now, On the other hand, like it says, beyond 36 months after the rule goes into effect, the compliance period no longer applies, even if the final mixture has a pending marketing submission or application. So let's say you submitted an e-liquid through the PMTA process. Okay, you sent the application with all of the statistical analyses and chemical analyses and toxicology reports and all this stuff, right? Spent $600,000 or more for it. You sent it to the FDA. And let's say the FDA does not get to that application until after May 10th of 2019. And guess what? This e-liquid, I'm not picking on this particular e-liquid, but any e-liquid for that matter, will literally have to be taken off of the market shelves because the FDA has not approved of that application. Even though you submitted the application. If it goes beyond those 3 years and they have not approved that application, even though it's in the process of being approved, you have to take your product off the market. Or they'll have enforcement action. They'll seize the property. They'll put an injunction so you never put any more e-liquid on the market. And like I said before, they could criminally prosecute you, put you in prison for breaking federal statute because you're considered as a drug dealer. You understand? Because you're not approved by the FDA. You might as well be selling cocaine or crack on the street because that's basically where your classification will be falling into. You're literally, in a way, drug trafficking because the nicotine in here, even though it's not classified as a drug with the FDA, but it's classified as a tobacco product, it's still an illicit. It's still an illicit product or ingredient that unless it's approved by the FDA, it becomes known as a black market product or an illicit product, and therefore it can be through the enforcement actions, you could go to prison, you can be fined. Like I spoke about that in the Part 6 FDA electronic submissions of all the fines. Your first offense can be $15,000 for your first offense, and then if you continuously break the law and ignore that first fine and just continuously sell your product on the market without FDA approval, and they take you to court, you can have a fine of up to $10 million. $10 million for one product. Serious stuff. Serious stuff. And I'm sure they would go probably after, the big companies on that, because they would like to have that $10 million, Or if they go after a small vape shop that manufactures their own e-liquid and they take them to court over it, the penalty of $10 million will not only put him out of business because he won't be able to pay for it, but he can also go to prison in turn. Because you can not only be fined financially, but it's an and/or situation. They can just fine you financially, or they can put you in prison, or they could do both. So, serious stuff after that 3 years. That's why that Cole-Bishop Amendment must go through. So those products before August 8th, 2016 can stay on the market, and then any products after August 8th, 2016, the new products will only have to go through the substantial equivalence process, which is less costly, less paperwork, and a lot more easier to go through than the PMTA process. So I'm going to stop right now on this particular subpart C, and then I'll come back with subpart D. See you guys then. Bye.